Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Marginal Support. I am your host, Andre Lindy at Marginal Support. Support is anything but marginal. I'm honored to have my guest, Miles, today. He is a veteran in the support world. We kind of have a funny connection. Actually, he hired most of the people I worked with at a previous company, but I don't want to steal any more of his thunder. So, Miles, thank you for joining us today. Just give a brief introduction, if you would.
Thank you for having me. I'm one of those support lifers. I've been building support teams for a very long time. It's what I do, it's who I am. And I got to say, I love the tagline about support being a mindset. You couldn't be more spot on than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's in my opinion, support is just one of those things where I don't think it's really either you're cut out for it or you're not cut out for it. But once people start doing support and they figure out that it's not an easy job and it can be very draining, I think some people are like, no, I'm going to get out of this. But then there are us who, when we start doing support, we're just still wired a little different, where we want to keep doing it, right? I mean, it's a job that sometimes is thankless, but I think you always find a new challenge when you're doing support.
So that's definitely for sure. To me, it's always been about the solving the puzzles, the solving the problems, the technical problems, people problems, process problems, organizational problems. And it's just, I love the daily challenge of it.
So you just touched on two different things, and also your introduction I kind of want to dig into, since you do have a vast amount of experience in this area. What's your experience? What advice do you have to people when you say, "Okay, we need to start growing a team"? You know, what processes do you put in place? I want to kind of make this in two different ways right here. How do you see growing the team process when it's a small team where you're basically going maybe from 0 to 1 or 1 to 2 versus when you already have a team established and then you have to grow it from there? So kind of going from nothing or coming in when everything's established. What are your takes on those?
Yeah, you're right that those are two different things. At the very beginning, when you've got 0 to 3 people, everyone's doing everything, and you've got to wear a bunch of different hats every minute of the day. When I was building like the team at Marketo, I started with some very strong, very senior people because they had to be able to do that context switching and be a consultant and be a support and be everything else that comes with that being in a startup mode. As that team grew, once we got to about 12, those three original guys became the managers under me. As we grew much larger than that, a couple of them have gone on to even surpass me in their careers. They've become VPs of support at other organizations. They were strong, driven people. On the other side of that, my last job at Okta, a couple of summers ago, I doubled the size of that team from 12 to 25. When you've got a large team like that, you can look for different things. You can get people who are more siloed or specialized. They don't have to be generalists, as long as they have the right background for the role you're hiring them for. So if you're hiring for general support, you have to go for a lot of things. For hiring for just backline support or just supporting a particular piece or developer support, you can get more specialized. So as the team grows, specialization grows, and you can hire different profiles at that point.
I mean, both sound pretty exciting, honestly. I mean, because at the start, you have to put on many hats. But do you find it to be more challenging when you have an existing team and then you do have to kind of maybe dig through the weeds a little, or you have to find like the right puzzle piece for that team? Because at the start, you can, if someone's a generalist, that's great. But then when you grow, it must be a little bit harder to find that specialized person for your team. How do you approach that when you have to be more specialized in your search?
Yeah, part of it is understanding the team's strengths. I know they talk about skills matrices, and now while that's a very boring thing to talk about, understanding where on the team you've got weaknesses. Gee, we don't have anyone who really understands HTML and CSS. It wasn't important before, but now that we're growing, we should have somebody on board so you can start looking for that profile. Even as I hire new people into a larger team, I always tell them, don't worry about being the new guy on a team of 12 or 25 or 80. Find something that the team is lacking and become expert at it. So actually, you find that hole and fill it, and you can be that person on the team, even though you're the new guy.
You're making yourself indispensable. Sounds like you're.
Exactly.
It's about proving your worth, but also, I was just talking to someone earlier today, and um, he was saying that he likes new people coming on the teams because new people come in with a new set of eyes. Because I think you've seen it, I've seen it, where there are processes set in place, and everyone says, "Well, that's just the way it's always been done." But when someone new comes in, they can say, "Well, this doesn't make sense. Why do you do it?" And I think that I think being a support, you have to kind of take that attitude towards also the work you do, because if you're working in a platform and you're just always going about the same answer, eventually you're going to hit a roadblock. So, I mean, what's your take on support people always coming into tickets or always coming into something with a new set of eyes?
I love it. One of the things I like about support people, they have to have curiosity. They have to not just answer the what, but the why. And I've told my teams, as we grow from 3 to 10 to 20 to 80, we're going to change. The tools are going to change. The processes are going to change. The expectations are going to change. What's right at 3 is not right at 12. What's right at 12 is not right at 50. And you want those new people to come in and challenge you. You want them to, take down the sacred cow, as it were. So, you guys are always doing it this way. At my last company, we were much bigger. We did it that way. Oh, I hadn't thought about the fact we're ready for that now. It's like having a child as they grow through different stages. Oh, I didn't realize that you're old enough to make your own lunch. I saw someone else do it. You have to realize your team is at that next phase, and sometimes it takes that outside perspective to open your eyes to say, oh, we're there, aren't we? Let's do that.
So, throughout your career, where you've seen lots of iterations and you've seen lots of changes, I'm curious, what are certain things that you have always wanted to carry over from team to team? You're like, this has been tried and true. Then, what are things that you tried and then you realize later on, actually, I need to change this up now. This is not working the way that it used to be.
Yeah, each team, each company's product is different. And when we went from an all on-prem staff to an all remote staff, the rules changed. So with the on-prem staff, I would have the team meeting in a conference room, and it would be very, well, I was a younger manager then, very controlled. As we got to the remote, having people from all over the globe on a Zoom meeting, it's different. You have to make sure that you give people time. So I made sure that we always had a round robin. I would take the first 5 or 10 minutes to talk about what I needed to. Then each person intentionally got the spotlight. You don't get the visual cues that you do when you're all in the room together. Oh, Andre hasn't said a word. Andre, no, we have to make sure to pull those people in. So the rules do change with the team and with the structure, with the locations. I think I wandered away from the question there. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I think it's more about just when when you look at processes in place and you said, okay, in my last company, this process worked great, and then you take it to another company, it works good. Well, that's it's great. That's easy work. But what are processes that worked really well at a previous company, and then you tried to bring into a next company, and maybe it didn't exactly blow up in your face, but you're like, oh, this just doesn't fit what I'm looking for. How do you adjust and how do you react to that when you thought something was going to work really well, but then you try and you're like, this is not working here at all.
Yeah, to be the best example is a support uh, daily thing, escalations to engineering. Different engineering teams have asked me for different things in doing those escalations. So while on one team, I had my front line, my back line, we had a very strict rule as to how it had to go through those before it went to engineering, and here's the checklist that you have to submit. Had a different engineering team who was far more flexible because this particular team I had was already known for being equivalent of the level 2 or level 3. We had fewer guardrails. We were able to just directly escalate because we had the reputation. So, forcing structure that you needed at one company onto another company, it's unnatural. Um, at one of my companies, I had an offshore BPO team. And when I first got there, I saw how they were doing case management. And even though we were using Salesforce, they had a spreadsheet that they were using every morning to track cases. That was my reaction. I saw that, I thought, holy moly, I thought, no way in the world could that work. But I was new to that team, and there was other obvious problems I was brought in to solve. So I figured, we'll worry about that later. It was working for them. Don't break something that's working. But God, I would never institute that as a process. And when we migrated from Salesforce Classic to Salesforce Lightning, I replaced their spreadsheet within Lightning with what they needed in the tool. That's not a process I would have done with that spreadsheet. Good Lord, that scared me to death when I saw it. But
Oh, that seems
there's
like
things
it's
you have to read the room, understand what's working, what's not working, and prioritize. What battle do I want to fight today? There's 5 broken things, but this first thing is the thing where I have to fix it because we're bleeding.
I think that speaks to a lot how support people also how we have to prioritize tickets and we have to understand what is basically what is the hot potato or what needs the most attention where sometimes there can be false positives where we really have to take a deep look and say, okay, where does actually my attention need to be right now? I think that's a great call out. One thing I also want to talk about to you about growing teams and processes is it's something you and I have talked about in the past, and I've wrote posts, and you've also wrote posts on this. Is when people go from IC to manager, I honestly believe that's not a difficult transition, because those managers are still close to the ticket queue. They can still fall back on some of their tendencies. What do you think are some of the more difficult things for managers to do when they start to get farther and farther away from being an IC where they were probably more comfortable? Like, how have you dealt with that in your own career, but then how have you also helped mentor people who are starting to go up that ladder and they have to break some of those habits?
Yeah, going from IC to manager is very tricky, especially if you're doing it within the team where you were the IC. Because one day you're their peer, you're having lunch, you're telling jokes about your boss, and the next day you are the boss. And the environment changes. It's subtle at first, but you start to realize that when you walk into the break room, the conversation stops or changes. The thing they were laughing about, it just went silent because now, whether you like it or not, there's a power relationship. It's a different set of rules. It's going from dating to being married. There's subtle differences at first, but you start to realize this is not the same as it used to be. It's better in many ways. It's different in many ways. When I first became a manager, it was within the same company, but it was to a different team on the other side of the country. So I walked in as the manager, not as a former peer. And in that regard, it was much easier. I knew the product, I knew the tools, I knew the people, but I never had that peer-to-peer relationship with them. I came in as the new manager. That was, in my opinion, much easier. Besides that, as a young manager, I remember one guy coming to me talking about a customer who was really upset. And I said something stupid. I said something like, well, pee on his leg and give him a warm, fuzzy feeling. Right? It was just some stupid comment. I was a new manager. I didn't have filters. I didn't. And he actually put in the case note, Miles said, I thought, holy crap, I'm going to lose my job. It's a different set of expectations. And as a new manager, it takes a while to learn it. It's riding a bike without the training wheels anymore. It's a different world. Personally, as you know, I've took that management track long ago, and that was where I wanted to go. I love having been there. It isn't for everybody. Some people want to stay on the technical track, become a senior techie. When you've outgrown, frontline support or whatever, there's support planning, there's support operations, there's product management, there's CSMs. There's lots of things you can take that same skill set to without having to go the management track.
So for managers that do want to aspire and do want to go past that frontline manager, I feel that when you're a frontline manager, you can be tactical, and that's all well and good because that's your responsibility to be very tactical. But then, the higher you go, the more strategic you have to be, and I think that's a completely different muscle that you have to learn. So, why do you think that is so hard for people that are originally ICs and tactical will then shift their mindset to be more strategic in their thinking?
It's a growth thing. Again, going back to the child developing into the adolescent, into the teen, into the young adult, your viewpoints change. When you're 20, you're worrying about your career. When you're 30, you're worried about family. When you're 40, you're worrying about community, whatever. As a first-time manager, your focus is downward. You're looking at your team. Your timeline is 1 day to 1 month. You're doing scheduling and butts and seats. As you move up to a senior manager, you're now working more on process and collaboration across support teams. You become director, you're now working on collaboration across other technical teams like product and engineering, like the field, like account management. As a senior director, you're starting to get more into working with VPs on a 2-year horizon, not just a 1-year horizon. But it's all part of growing. You can't take a person, well, you can, but it's hard to take a person from being an IC all their life and dropping them into a vice president position. I mean, unless they're just brilliant, observant, really on top of things, there's a lot of intermediate steps you need to take along the way to build those muscles. My take, it's all about timeline and how broad your perspective is, but you've got to take it one step at a time.
I think for me that I think that's good advice. I mean, one of the things that at least personally I've seen is that when I've had good managers and they help me nudge me in the right direction, it really helps. I think the kind of managers that I think are not helpful is when they just say, "I need you to be more strategic," or "I need you to think bigger." You know, it's hard when you hear that message. He's like, "Okay, great, but how do I go from A to C when you're not giving me B, right?" So, how have you dealt with that when someone comes to you and they say, "I want to, progress to this next level"? How do you help them, make that shift? Maybe like you're saying, go from a toddler to an adolescent to a preteen, to use that analogy you're talking about.
Part of what I tell people is, to get that next position, you have to be seen doing things uh, relevant to that position. And what I try and do is give people those opportunities. I've got an individual contributor who wants to be a team lead. I make sure they get some projects to do and talk about at the team meeting, so people start to look at them with a different set of eyes. With a manager, tell them, well, if you want to be a senior manager, this is some of the stuff I need to do. That be more strategic. You can't just say that. That's foolishness. I used to have a boss who said, all you have to do is log in, boom, 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 and solve the problem. And I would tell him, it's the boom, boom, boom that I need the coaching on. Give me better answers. But so I, give them again the projects, the opportunities. Here's something my boss, my VP, has asked me for. Why don't you run with it, and I'll work with you on it and make sure that you get credit for it, and we'll talk it through. Give you a chance to start practicing that muscle. You can't just be thrown in. I'll give you that opportunity. You want to get to the next level. Here's things that you would be doing at that level. Let's start with, again, assigning you these projects or interactions. You want to be director? I'm going to make you my liaison to this engineering team. You start building that muscle, because as a director, you're going to have to do it across engineering. So things like that.
I think that's great. I mean, that speaks to what I think separates a manager from a leader. Is a leader looks out for his people, but then he also tries to be their advocate. He tries to elevate them, but then he listens to them. And when they say, "I want to do this," like you're saying, you actively look for projects. Which I think brings me to my last question: is what are you actively looking to do right now? Like, what is driving you these days? What's making you excited these days?
What I've learned is I love to build. I've even taken that into my non-work life. I've volunteered at a theater company where I build sets. Turns out I like to build. My most fun in my career was when I've been building teams either from scratch or taking a small team and building it into a global team. Being a caretaker is good. It pays the bills, but that's not what my next job's going to be. You give me 50 people in the front line and give them process. Yeah, I'll do process. I'll do relationship, and I'll take your money. But I like to build, whether it's the process, the relationship, the tool, the team. That to me is where I get my energy from. That's the reward. At the end of the day, I can say I did that. I helped make this thing, and to me, that's the important part.
I think that speaks so well to what we are as sport people. Is that we like to be successful, but I also think that we just feel more success when we see other people being successful. As support people, also I think sometimes it's hard for us to sometimes take credit or say, you kind of try to deflect and say, well, I only helped out in the process, but this person really did that. So I think it's sometimes hard for me, I don't know about for you, to sometimes accept that praise and say, no, it wasn't me, it was that person. But sometimes you actually, yeah, that actually was me that did that.
So I've developed a lot of people from IC to manager who have eventually become that VP title that I still haven't reached. So, yeah.
Well, it was a great time speaking with you today, Miles. I mean, I
Thank you for
really
inviting me.
enjoyed speaking with you, and like I just say to everyone, always keep this in mind. So support is not just a job, support is a mindset. I'll see everyone on our next episode. Bye,
Thanks, Andre.
everyone.
Bye.